You look like you took off a couple lbs.
Yeah, a couple.
What was the process behind that? Just something you want to do for yourself?
I don't eat every 5 minutes.
Well,
That seems to help.
John Goodman has spent nearly 4 decades making America laugh, first as Dan Connor on Roseanne, then as the gruff patriarch of the Connors and the righteous Gemstones. But lately, fans aren't talking about his acting. They're talking about his face, his frame, his whole new look. Can you believe the man once known for his larger-than-life presence now looks almost unrecognizable? And once you see how far he's come, from nearly 400 pounds to a leaner, healthier version of himself, you'll understand exactly why the internet can't stop talking about John Goodman right now. From big and boozy to leaner and lucid. There was a time when John Goodman's size wasn't just part of his image, it was practically a character trait. Producers wrote roles around his bulk. Fans loved him for it. He was the big, warm, funny guy who filled a room just by walking into it. Nobody really questioned it, because that was just John being John. And for a long time, that image worked for him, both on screen and off. But behind the jokes and the beer-bellied characters, there was a much heavier story playing out, one that most fans didn't see until years later. Goodman has openly admitted that alcohol ruled a huge chunk of his life. He wasn't just a social drinker who overdid it at parties here and there. He was drinking on set, drinking before interviews, and by his own admission, drinking his way toward disaster. Can you imagine showing up to accept an Emmy and being so hungover that you're shaking through the entire ceremony? That's exactly what he says happened. And it's the kind of story that sounds almost unbelievable coming from someone so widely respected in the industry. Something had to give, and in 2007, it finally did. Goodman decided to walk away from alcohol for good. It wasn't a single dramatic moment where he swore off drinking forever and never looked back without a struggle. It was more like a slow surrender, one built on small decisions made day after day. He told Reader's Digest that sobriety became real for him only after he stopped fighting it and let himself surrender to the process, admitting that once he made it through those first difficult weeks, he knew there was no going back to the life he used to live. Here's where it gets interesting. Quitting alcohol didn't just change his liver or his sleep schedule, it changed his entire relationship with food. Goodman has said that for years, he ate the same way he drank, compulsively, without limits, chasing comfort instead of nutrition. Once alcohol was gone, that same restless energy had nowhere to go. So at first, food quietly filled the gap he'd left behind. It took him years of trial and error to figure out that real lasting change meant fixing both habits at once, not just swapping one vice for another and calling it progress. It's worth remembering just how public his struggle was, too, playing out in interviews, on late-night couches, and eventually in his own words during sit-downs where he didn't shy away from admitting how bad things had gotten before he finally made the change. That's the part people forget when they see his transformation splashed across headlines now. This wasn't an overnight glow-up sparked by a single decision. It was a decades-long tug-of-war between old habits and a new version of himself he was still trying to build piece by piece, year after year. And somewhere in the middle of that struggle, the man who once approached 400 pounds slowly, quietly, started becoming someone else entirely, without ever making a big public announcement about it. He's also been candid about the fact that his commitment to sobriety runs deeper than just avoiding a drink. Goodman has said he still attends recovery meetings on a near-daily basis, treating his sobriety less like a finished project and more like ongoing maintenance, the same way someone might treat physical therapy after a major surgery. That mindset, taking things one day at a time instead of assuming the battle is permanently won, seems to be part of what's kept both his sobriety and his health changes intact for nearly 2 decades now. John Goodman has been famous for over 40 years, but even longtime fans admit they've never seen him quite like this before. Stick around, because what caused this dramatic shift might surprise you more than the transformation itself. The man behind the transformation. So how exactly did John Goodman go from the biggest guy in the room to someone fans now struggle to recognize at the grocery store? It wasn't one single trick or a fad diet he tried for a few weeks before giving up. It was a complete overhaul of how he lives, and it happened slowly, unfolding over more than a decade of consistent effort. Reports say Goodman has lost roughly 200 pounds total since he first committed to getting healthy, a number that's honestly kind of staggering when you actually sit with it. That's not a few pant sizes smaller, that's an entirely different body carrying him through his 70s. Coverage of his appearance at the SXSW conference earlier this year noted that he's leaned into a Mediterranean-style way of eating while cutting out the drinking and overeating habits that once defined his lifestyle. Think olive oil instead of fried everything, fish and vegetables instead of heavy comfort food, and portions that actually make sense for a human body instead of a Sunday buffet spread out across an entire table. But diet was only half the equation, and honestly, probably not even the harder half. Goodman also leaned into low-impact movement, things like the elliptical machine and boxing training, activities that let him build strength and burn calories without wrecking joints that had already taken a serious beating from decades of carrying extra weight around. And that part matters more than people realize, because Goodman has had 2 knee replacements. Years of extra weight had worn down his joints to the point where surgery wasn't optional anymore, it was inevitable. So every workout he does now has to be smart and deliberate, not just intense for the sake of burning calories fast. There's also the mental side of it, the part that doesn't show up in before and after photos or viral grocery store snapshots. Goodman has spoken about journaling his food intake and staying aware of the emotional triggers that used to send him spiraling. The kind of quiet, unglamorous work that actually makes weight loss stick for the long term instead of bouncing back after a few months. It's easy to focus on the physical result, the number on the scale, the smaller frame in recent photos circulating online. But the real transformation happened in the small, boring, repeated choices he made almost every single day for more than a decade. Choices nobody was filming or posting about. And here's the thing that makes his story different from a lot of celebrity transformations we hear about today. There's no mention anywhere in his own accounts of weight loss surgery or medication shortcuts driving this change. It's diet, movement, sobriety, and sheer stubborn consistency stacked on top of each other year after year. Slow, unglamorous, and apparently remarkably effective when you give it enough time to actually work. Goodman has also talked openly about theater work being part of what keeps him active, noting that stage performances demand a level of physicality that television and film often don't require. Staying involved in live productions, he's suggested, gave him another reason to keep his body capable and strong, separate from any strict weight loss goal. It became less about chasing a number and more about simply being able to keep doing the work he loves without his body holding him back. Now, here's where things get even more interesting, because his physical transformation is only half of what's been keeping him relevant. His career never actually slowed down, even while his body was changing right in front of the cameras. A career that never slowed down. It's easy to assume that a decade-long health journey might have pulled John Goodman out of the spotlight for a while. Maybe a hiatus, maybe fewer roles while he focused on himself. But that's not what happened at all. If anything, Goodman just kept working, layering an already massive career on top of an already massive career without much of a pause. Let's back up for a second, because his resume is honestly kind of wild when you look at the full scope of it. Goodman was born in Afton, Missouri in 1952 and initially attended college on a football scholarship before an injury pushed him toward acting instead. That single injury basically rerouted the entire rest of his life, and if you really think about it, we probably wouldn't know his name at all if that football career had panned out the way he originally planned. He broke through playing Dan Connor on Roseanne from 1988 to 1997, a role that earned him 7 Emmy nominations and a Golden Globe for Best Actor back in 1993. Then, decades later, he returned to that same character, first when Roseanne came back for a revival season in 2018, and then again when the show transformed into The Connors after Roseanne Barr's departure from the franchise. Somehow, he made an aging blue-collar dad feel just as relevant in 2018 as he did back in 1988. That's not an easy thing to pull off across 3 completely different decades of television. He also spent years as a memorable presence on Saturday Night Live, hosting the show more than a dozen times, a number that puts him among the most frequent hosts in the program's long history. That kind of recurring trust from a show known for burning through hosts fast says something about how reliable and well-liked Goodman has always been behind the scenes, not just in front of an audience. And that's before you even get into his film work, which is arguably even more impressive when you line it all up. Goodman became one of the Coen brothers' go-to guys, showing up in Raising Arizona, Barton Fink, The Big Lebowski, and Oh Brother, where art thou across more than a decade of collaboration. He voiced Sully in Monsters, Inc., one of the most beloved animated characters of the last 25 years, a role that introduced him to an entirely new generation of fans who'd never even seen an episode of Roseanne. He popped up in Argo, 10 Cloverfield Lane, and dozens of other projects spanning genres that most actors never even attempt across a full career, let alone one lifetime. More recently, Goodman spent nearly a decade playing Eli Gemstone, the patriarch of a chaotic televangelist family, on HBO's The Righteous Gemstones. That show wrapped its 4th and final season back in 2025, closing out one of the more unexpectedly beloved roles of his later career on a high note. So while fans online were busy noticing his slimmer frame throughout that same stretch, Goodman was simultaneously wrapping up a hit HBO series and adding yet another chapter to a career most working actors could only dream about achieving. What makes all of this even more remarkable is the timeline. Goodman wasn't taking extended breaks to focus purely on his health, the way some celebrities do when they disappear from public view for months at a time. He was managing his transformation while still showing up on set, still memorizing dialogue, still hitting marks for cameras, all while quietly reshaping his body behind the scenes. That kind of dual commitment, staying professionally active while also overhauling decades of habits, says a lot about the discipline underneath the whole story. It also helps explain why casual viewers took so long to notice the change. When someone is on screen every week for years at a stretch, gradual shifts in their appearance can blend into the background, especially when the roles themselves, like a middle-aged televangelist patriarch, don't exactly call attention to physical fitness. It wasn't until candid off-duty photos started circulating that the scale of the transformation really became obvious to people who hadn't been paying close attention year over year. And just when people thought they'd seen every side of John Goodman there is to see, a random encounter at a grocery store ended up sparking one of the biggest conversations about him in years. The grocery store photo that broke the internet. Here's the moment that really got people talking. In August 2026, actor David DeLuise, best known for playing Jerry Russo on Wizards of Waverly Place, ran into Goodman completely by chance while shopping for groceries. DeLuise, clearly starstruck by the encounter, snapped a quick selfie and shared the photo on Instagram, calling Goodman a childhood legend and expressing how meaningful the brief meeting was for him. That casual grocery run photo spread across social media almost instantly, popping up on multiple platforms within hours. Fans flooded the comments, many of them genuinely stunned by how different Goodman looked compared to the version of him they remembered from decades of television. Some people straight up didn't recognize him at first glance, scrolling right past before doing a double take. Others clarified in the comments that he wasn't sick, just healthier than he's been in years, following a transformation that had quietly been building for over a decade, before this single photo made it impossible for casual fans to ignore any longer. One widely shared post even broke down the numbers for confused fans, explaining that Goodman's weight had once reached around 400 pounds before his total loss of nearly 200 pounds brought him to where he is today. A comparison that helped put just how dramatic the change really is into perspective for anyone seeing it for the first time. What's wild is that this wasn't even his first big public moment tied to his appearance this year. Just months earlier, coverage of his appearance at SXSW already had people talking about his changed look, but something about the informal, unplanned nature of the grocery store photo hit differently. It felt real in a way that red carpet photos never quite do. There's something about seeing a celebrity caught off guard, no makeup team, no lighting setup, just a guy buying groceries on an ordinary afternoon that makes a transformation feel genuinely earned rather than staged for cameras. Through all of this attention, Goodman's personal life has stayed remarkably steady, which says a lot considering how much everything else around him has changed. He's been married to his wife, Annabeth, since 1989, and the couple has weathered plenty together over more than 3 decades, including his years-long battle with alcoholism and the health struggles that came with it. As Annabeth herself has been described in profiles covering their relationship, she stood by him through his darkest years and played a central role in his eventual recovery and lifestyle turnaround. Together, they raised their daughter, Molly, who has since built her own career working behind the scenes in the entertainment industry, a path that keeps her connected to the same world her father has spent his life in. Goodman has also continued attending recovery meetings almost daily, with past profiles noting that he still shows up to Alcoholics Anonymous sessions on a near-daily basis, even years into his recovery, treating sobriety as something that requires ongoing attention rather than a box he checked once and moved past. That consistency, showing up for the unglamorous parts of recovery long after the initial crisis has faded, mirrors the same steady approach he's taken with his physical health over the years, and it's a habit he's credited with keeping both his mind and his body in a much better place than they were 2 decades ago. Financially, Goodman's decades of steady work have paid off in a big way too, even if the exact figures vary depending on who's doing the estimating. His net worth is estimated at around $35 million, built through television salaries, film residuals, voice acting royalties, and real estate, a reflection of just how consistently he's worked across nearly every corner of entertainment for well over 4 decades now. So what happens next for John Goodman? With the righteous Gemstones wrapped and his health transformation now fully out in the open for the world to see, all eyes are on whatever he decides to take on next. One thing's for sure, whether it's another film role, another voice performance, or just another candid photo that goes viral overnight, people are paying closer attention to John Goodman right now than they have in years. And maybe that's the real story underneath all the headlines and the viral grocery store selfie. This isn't a man chasing a trend or trying to reinvent his image for the cameras. It's someone who quietly decided back in 2007 that he wanted more years with his wife, more time watching his daughter build her own career, and more chances to keep doing the work he loves without his body holding him back. Everything since then, the diet changes, the workouts, the knee replacements, the daily recovery meetings, has just been the long, unglamorous follow-through on that one decision. And honestly, after everything he's been through to get here, sobriety, surgery, slow, steady change, he's earned every bit of the attention he's getting right now. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.